Trump. Untold Stories. Episode 1. The Boy Named Trump. Ambition Born in a Castle. When most people hear the name Donald Trump, a flurry of associations floods their minds. Wealth, controversy, power, politics, and media spectacle. He's been called many things: a billionaire, a showman, a disruptor, a provocateur, even a demagogue. But what few pause to ask is, who was he before all of that? What kind of boy grows up to become the man who would later dominate headlines, run for the presidency, and alter the course of American politics? To truly understand Donald Trump, we must first strip away the golden veneer and step inside the childhood that forged him, the pressures, the ambition, the rules of the game as he saw them. Because Trump's story doesn't begin at the White House. It doesn't begin at Trump Tower. It begins in a mansion in Queens, New York, with a boy who refused to be ordinary. Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, into a family of 5 siblings. He was the 4th child of Fred and Mary Ann Trump. His father, Fred Trump, wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a force of nature in New York real estate. A man of few words and hard lines, Fred was the kind of father who saw parenting not as nurturing, but as molding. He treated his children like projects, shaping them for competition, power, and success. There was no bedtime storytelling, no gentle encouragements. Instead, there were lessons, harsh, direct, and relentless. Life is combat, Fred believed. You win or you lose. There's nothing in between. Donald grew up in a home that looked like royalty on the outside, but functioned like a boot camp on the inside. The Trump family lived in a stately house in the Jamaica Estates neighborhood of Queens, grand, elegant, polished. But beneath the chandeliers and trimmed hedges was a household run with military precision. Fred demanded excellence. Mistakes were not tolerated. Emotions were suppressed. Only results mattered. As a child, Donald was aggressive, energetic, and extremely competitive. He wasn't the kind to sit quietly in class or follow rules just for the sake of it. If something didn't make sense to him or challenged his ego, he'd push back. Teachers described him as headstrong and rowdy. He threw erasers. He interrupted lessons. He once punched a teacher in the face. His mother, overwhelmed by his behavior, would often say, "Donald is a handful." But Fred saw something else. Not a troubled child, but raw potential. Potential that needed discipline, not softness. At age 13, after repeated issues at school, Donald was sent to the New York Military Academy, a strict all-boys boarding school upstate that combined academic rigor with military discipline. For many children, this would have been a punishment. But for Trump, it was a transformation. Here, he found something he could respect, a structure that rewarded domination. He quickly rose through the ranks, becoming a student leader, involved in drill teams and sports. He wasn't known for intellectual brilliance, but he commanded presence. Even as a teenager, Donald understood power, not just having it, but looking like you had it. The military academy didn't just polish his behavior. It reinforced his belief that the world was a contest. You had to win, you had to be seen, you had to take control. He once said, "I learned much more from military school than college." That's not surprising, because NYMA didn't just train boys, it forged egos. It taught young Trump that leadership wasn't about compromise, it was about taking charge. By the time he graduated, Donald had cultivated a persona that would follow him the rest of his life. Assertive, confident, even theatrical. He wasn't interested in being liked, he was interested in being respected. More than that, he was interested in being feared, envied, and admired. He had internalized the core idea passed down from Fred. Nice guys finish last. Fred Trump's influence on his son ran deeper than mere mentorship. Fred was a titan in his own right. He had built an empire of middle-income housing throughout Brooklyn and Queens. He navigated bureaucracy with precision, managed finances conservatively, and never sought the spotlight. To him, success was quiet, efficient, and profitable. Donald admired this, but also rebelled against it. He didn't want to live in the shadow of a builder. He wanted to become a brand. And to do that, he'd have to be everything his father wasn't. Bold, loud, and impossible to ignore. Donald began to see the world not as a place of fixed rules, but as a stage. If you could get people to look at you, believe in you, even fear you, then you had the advantage. He started crafting a public persona, from the sharp suits to the power ties, the calculated tone of voice, and the relentless confidence. He watched how famous businessmen moved, how celebrities behaved, and he fused the two. Trump was going to be a businessman, yes, but one with star power. But this wasn't just vanity, it was strategy. Even in his early 20s, Trump grasped something most businessmen didn't. In the television era, perception was power. Attention could be monetized. Headlines could be turned into leverage. Every photo, every quote, every controversy could serve a purpose. Trump didn't wait to be discovered. He promoted himself. He called journalists. He exaggerated deals. He made promises he sometimes couldn't keep. But he did it all with one goal in mind: dominance. Those who knew him as a young man often say Trump seemed obsessed with winning. Not just in business, but in everything. Social settings, debates, even small arguments. He hated losing. He once said, "Show me someone without an ego, and I'll show you a loser." That wasn't a joke. That was a belief. For Donald Trump, ego wasn't a flaw. It was fuel. And ambition wasn't a phase. It was his default state. Even the way he spoke reflected this mentality. Trump learned early that short, punchy, repetitive statements made people remember him. "I'm a winner. Nobody builds like me. I have the best words." These weren't gaffes. They were branding. Whether he was in a boardroom or on national television, he knew he had to dominate the conversation, to control the narrative. Because if you tell a story big enough, loud enough, and often enough, it becomes truth in people's minds. And all of this, the childhood discipline, the military school transformation, the father's towering expectations, the obsession with image and power, laid the foundation for what was to come. Long before the world knew him as Mr. Trump or President Trump, he was just a boy in a castle, determined to make the world remember his name. So this is where the real story begins. Not with towers in Manhattan or rallies filled with red hats, but in the mind of a young boy who refused to be second, who saw life as war, and who believed deep down that destiny wasn't inherited, it was seized. In the next episode, we'll follow Trump into the wild streets of manufacturing real estate. A young man fresh out of business school, armed with a famous last name, big ideas, and even bigger risks. It's the start of a new chapter, where ambition meets reality, and where the boy from Queens makes his first move to conquer the city that never sleeps. This has been Historical Figure, Donald Trump, Untold Stories. Don't forget to follow the series for more revealing chapters on one of the most polarizing figures in modern history.